Have you ever stopped to think that many of the rules we follow in life may never have truly been chosen by us? From a very young age, we are taught what we should study, how we should work, and even what it means to be successful. Everything seems normal at first, but eventually a question begins to emerge. Is this reality truly ours? Or are we simply following a script inside a system we never really questioned? Curiously, a movie released years ago brought a powerful reflection about this idea. In the film Gattaca, people are judged by their DNA before they ever have a chance to prove who they really are. But behind the story about genetic determinism, there is a much deeper message about freedom, merit, and mindset. And once you start to understand what the film is actually trying to show, you begin to notice something unsettling. The parallels between that fictional world and the world we live in today are surprisingly similar. The illusion of reality and the idea of the matrix. Many people live as if they were inside a kind of matrix. They follow automatic routines day after day without ever stopping to question what lies behind what we call reality. Society presents a ready-made script. Study, work, consume, repeat. Over time, this logic becomes a kind of mental prison. A prison so subtle, so invisible, that most people never even realize they're inside it. When you begin to observe things more carefully, you start to notice how many systems operate quietly in the background. They shape habits, influence desires, and sometimes even define our dreams. This doesn't necessarily mean that everything is part of some massive conspiracy, but the idea of an illusory reality has been explored for centuries in philosophy, psychology, and even cinema. And it is precisely when we start questioning our perception of reality that the first crack appears in the illusion, mental control, and the manipulation of the masses. Now think about this for a moment. Why do certain ideas seem to appear everywhere all at the same time? Television, social media, news outlets, entertainment. Often, the same dominant narrative shows up in slightly different forms across all of them. This constant repetition works almost like a form of mental programming. It slowly influences how people interpret the world without them even realizing it. This is how much of what we call mass manipulation actually happens. When a message is repeated enough times, it begins to feel like absolute truth. Mental control does not always need to be obvious or aggressive. Sometimes it simply works by slowly shaping beliefs and perceptions. That's why developing critical thinking is so important. Compare different sources, read authors with opposing views, and question ideas that seem a little too obvious. Media, culture, and the shaping of reality. Media and mass culture hold enormous power over how we see the world. Movies, series, news stories, and even memes all play a role in shaping our perception of reality. And often we don't even notice it happening. It's not just entertainment. There's also a strong layer of social influence behind it. These narratives shape opinions, behavior, and sometimes even our ambitions. Think about how certain lifestyles are constantly presented as the normal way to live. Success, beauty, wealth, status. The repetition of these images subtly directs collective expectations and desires. One practical way to escape this influence is to diversify your sources of information. Reading books like 1984 by George Orwell or Brave New World by Aldous Huxley can help develop a more critical perspective about these systems. Genetic determinism and the message of Gattaca. One of the most powerful examples of this discussion appears in the film Gattaca. In that universe, society believes completely in genetic determinism. Your DNA defines how far you can go in life. Before people even try to achieve something, they're already classified, superior or inferior, all based on their genetics. This creates an enormous genetic inequality. The protagonist, Vincent, is born as what society calls an invalid, someone who, according to genetic prediction, should never achieve anything great. But Vincent refuses to accept that label. In order to escape the system, he assumes a false identity and enters a world that was never meant for him. And the story raises a powerful question. What truly defines a person? Merit or genetics? Personal growth and the will to overcome. What makes the story of Gattaca so powerful is its message about personal overcoming. Even while living in a system obsessed with genetic determinism, Vincent refuses to accept the identity imposed on him. Instead, he relies on something no DNA test can measure: determination, ambition, and an extraordinary level of willpower. This reflects a classic principle of personal development. Many barriers begin to mind long before they exist in the real world. When someone develops discipline and consistency, they begin to break limits that once seemed impossible. A simple exercise is to set small daily challenges. Study for 30 minutes a day. Learn something new. Train your focus. Because most great achievements are built from small habits repeated with persistence. Victim mentality versus action mentality. There's a profound difference between two ways of thinking: victim mentality and action mentality. In the first, a person believes everything is working against them: their family, money, opportunities, society. Over time, these justifications become limiting beliefs, and without realizing it, the person reinforces their own mental prison. But those who take responsibility for their path begin to see the world differently. This doesn't mean ignoring difficulties. It means understanding that there is almost always some level of choice. Many people who overcame social or financial barriers began with a simple shift. They changed how they interpreted reality. They replaced excuses with determination and consistent action, mental programming, and the perception of reality. Few people realize how much the human mind learns through repetition. From childhood, we absorb ideas from family, school, media, and culture. Over time, this creates a kind of mental programming, a framework that defines how we interpret the world. These ideas shape decisions, attitudes, and sometimes even our dreams. When someone deeply believes they are not capable of success, that belief becomes a mental filter. They begin avoiding opportunities, doubting themselves, and unconsciously reinforcing their own limitations. That is why many personal development experts suggest simple mental reprogramming practices. Write down your goals, visualize achievements, read books that challenge conventional ways of thinking. These small practices can slowly reshape how the mind perceives reality. Mental deprogramming and awakening awareness. Eventually, some people reach a moment of realization. They begin to notice that many of the ideas they carry were never truly chosen by them. They were absorbed from school, from media, from family, from culture itself. This is the beginning of what some call mental deprogramming. The moment when someone starts questioning the dominant narrative and realizing they may have been living inside an invisible system of control. The awakening of awareness does not happen overnight. It begins with simple questions. Why do I believe this? Where did this idea come from? Reading different authors, studying psychology, and observing how social influence operates can accelerate this process. Little by little, a person begins to step outside the mental prison and develop a more authentic and critical view of reality. After reflecting on all of this, one simple but powerful question remains. How many of the ideas you believe today are truly yours? And how many are simply part of a mental program built throughout your life? Often, the greatest system of control is not outside of us. It exists within our own minds, hidden in limiting beliefs we accepted without questioning. The story of Gattaca reminds us of something essential. Systems may try to define who we are, but determination, discipline, and willpower will always matter more than any label. True awakening begins the moment someone leaves victim mentality behind and takes responsibility for their own path by developing awareness and questioning the dominant narrative. So here is something worth reflecting on. Which ideas in your life need to be questioned today? Which limits were imposed on you? And which ones did you end up accepting? Perhaps the first step to leaving this mental prison is simply beginning to observe the world with greater curiosity and deeper critical thinking. And if reflections like this resonate with you and you want to keep exploring topics like consciousness, mindset, and the nature of reality, consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications. That way, you won't miss the next videos that may expand even further the way you see the world.